At 14, I was exposed and thrown out by my family due to my brother's lies. Years later, they madly invite me back. The thought flickered in Jake Thompson's mind like a neon sign, illuminating the shadows of his past. Here he was, a 28-year-old graduate student on the brink of presenting research that could alter the landscape of medical science. Days spent in the lab surrounded by microscopes, and the hum of machines had birthed innovations that industry giants coveted. Yet the triumph felt hollow, especially with the reunion invitation resting heavily in his pocket. It was a vortex of complicated emotions, resentment, bitterness, and a long-forgotten yearning for acceptance. He remembered Matt's face, the vile sneer as his brother accused him of being a family disgrace, the only thing that shattered the theoretical world Jake had constructed in his mind. Betrayal clawed at his heart, transforming the boy who once dreamed of greatness into a man haunted by unhealed wounds. How could he face the brother who thought he had won, all while the scent of familial warmth wafted in the air, taunting him? Jake clenched his notes tightly, wrestling with the paradox of wanting to prove himself while dreading that exposure would reveal all too much about the pain that lingered within. The evening of the reunion unfurled before him, layered in nostalgia and tension. The aroma of home-cooked meals flooded his senses, taking him back to simpler times overshadowed by complexity. Each step into the gathering was an admission. He belonged yet he didn't. As he moved deeper into the room, his father looked at him with a mix of pride and pity. His mother's embrace, once a source of comfort, now felt constricting. Jake perched on the edge of a forgotten chair, feeling the oppressive weight of Matt's presence loom over him. The brother who had basked in the family's approval while casting him into the shadows. Each laugh, each boast from Matt rubbed salt in his wounds, igniting a simmering anger within him that was hard to ignore. The conversations were festive, vibrant, but the underlying current of resentment electrified the atmosphere. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake's heart raced not from excitement but from the tide of emotions crashing around him, threatening to drown him in the doubts and fears that had disfigured his aspirations. He knew the moment was coming. The moment to flip the narrative, to redefine what had slipped from his grasp so long ago. As he prepared to speak, he could feel every eye bearing down on him, expectant, apprehensive. There was a fierce urge to stand and confront his past, to reveal the truth of his journey masked by years of misunderstanding and hurt. But as he clawed at the notes before him, the internal conflict pulsed, raw and unresolved. Why did he yearn for affirmation from those who had denied him? Could he forgive Matt's betrayal, or was he merely seeking closure? With every passing moment, the tension escalated, surging through him like a storm ready to break. The room held its breath, and so did Jake, poised at the edge of revelation, but his next words lingered in the thick air, weighted by fear and longing. Would he uncover his breakthrough, or shatter the fragile pretense of familial bonds? The question hung heavy, suffocating, waiting for the next stroke of courage or cowardice. The air thickened, and Jake's grip on his notes tightened until the paper crinkled under the pressure of his fingers. How had he arrived at this juncture, where the weight of expectations circled him like a predator, ready to pounce? It was as if he stood on the precipice between two worlds, the life he had forged from the ashes of betrayal and the family ties that had once bound him, now frayed and fragile. He could feel Matt's gaze like a spotlight, intent and probing, as if daring him to falter. The years of hard work, the late nights spent in the lab, the seemingly endless pursuit of validation, all for what? So that he could stand before those who had cast him aside, hoping for their approval? Jake's stomach twisted in a mix of rebellion and fear. He contemplated his next move, his mind racing with potential outcomes. But the thought of backing down now, of retreating into silence, made his heart pound with the sound of 1,000 missed opportunities. Perhaps this moment could be his metamorphosis, his chance to transform the narrative from one of disgrace to triumph even in the presence of his family's judgment. Gathering his resolve, Jake inhaled deeply, focusing on the familiar counts and data that danced in his mind like a shield against vulnerability. As he rose to stand, voices around him faded, their words no longer tangible. All that remained was the image of his brother, a twisted reflection of what Jake could have been: the favored son, the celebrated heir. But where had that path led? To an existence steeped in lies, a delusion of worth cultivated through manipulation. Jake's words struggled to escape, but they carried with them a weighty purpose, a desire for honesty to pierce the facade. "I've spent years in the lab," he began, his voice steadier than he felt, "researching ways to advance medical technology. This work is not merely about results, it's about healing not just physical ailments, but emotional scars." The bubbling tension of the audience shifted slightly, some faces now marked with curiosity. Jake pressed on, feeling emboldened. "I want to share my discoveries with you all, but I also feel the need to reclaim my narrative. I've spent too long in the shadows." A shift in the room caught his attention. Matt's expression had changed, a fleeting moment of confusion mingling with disbelief. Jake relished the power of that realization. This wasn't simply a moment of disclosure. It was a confrontation, an act of defiance against years of resentment. As he elaborated on his research findings, the words flowed like a river breaking through a dam, cascading past barriers of doubt, illuminating shadows of the past with brilliant hints of hope. He began to feel the gathering storm shift into something less threatening, as if the tension was merely energy fueling his speech rather than stifling it. Yet, even amidst this growth, flickers of doubt flickered at the edges of his mind. Would his journey truly reshape his relationship with his family? Would it serve as a bridge or a wall? The tension remained palpable, woven through the fabric of their interactions, especially with Matt sitting across the room. Jake focused on finishing his presentation, determined to maintain the momentum of his newfound strength. It was no longer just about impressing his family. It was about asserting his existence, his accomplishments. His voice grew stronger, invigorated by the realization that he was no longer the boy who had been cast out. He was a man, confident in his worth and abilities. And then, as he wrapped up his research findings, Jake sensed that the moment of confrontation was inevitable. It was simply a matter of time before he would need to take that final step to stand face to face with the brother who had wronged him. The reunion had shifted from a homecoming to a battleground of emotions. Could he still bridge the chasm between them, or was the time for acceptance long past? The riddle of his family bond continued to loom large, threatening to consume his newfound confidence, and Jake's heart raced once more as the impending decision loomed over him like a storm cloud. Would he confront Matt directly, or allow the past to linger between them, unaddressed? It was the question of a lifetime that begged to be answered as he prepared to seal his fate. The final slide faded into darkness, but Jake remained under the spotlight, an unwitting actor thrust into the center of a familial theater. His breath quickened as silence enveloped him, a tense void where he expected gasps or applause. Instead, he felt the weight of scrutiny intensify, especially from Matt. Would his brother see the earnestness behind the bravado he displayed? Jake's eyes flicked toward Matt, searching for any sign of recognition, remorse, or even the slightest inkling of brotherhood. But there was only the same detached expression embodied during their last encounter, one that told Jake all he needed to know: this would be a harder battle than he anticipated. The decline in familial affection tore at his insides, awakening memories of betrayal that clung like cobwebs, stubbornly refusing to dissipate. In that moment, as the applause finally faded into a murmur, Jake recognized the power that lay within this intersection of vulnerability and defiance. He had told his story. He had disclosed his truths. But a deeper revelation beckoned. Reclaiming his narrative was only the first act. The real test lay ahead: reconciling with the person who played a significant role in his family's perception of him. Around him, the audience consisted of disarrayed faces, some illuminated by empathy, others cloaked in skepticism. Adrenaline surged through him, buoying his self-assurance but also triggering anxiety at the prospect of facing Matt. This was uncharted territory, the kind that could either liberate him or plunge him deeper into despair. Suddenly, Jake felt the urge to venture forth, to cut through the static and confront the specter of his brother that had haunted him for years. The desire to reframe the narrative tightened like a noose but also steadied him. No longer was he just the once disgraced son, he yearned to be seen as an equal participant, deserving of sharing the family's legacy. "Matt," Jake called out, his voice steadier now as he stepped off the stage. The few who turned to listen observed with rapt attention. The tension hung thick. Faced with a range of emotions swirling in his chest, Jake pressed on. He had spent countless nights strategizing his approach, rehearsing lines, but now it was time to shed the facade. "This isn't just about the research I've done. This is personal. You can cast shadows, but I refuse to stay hidden behind them." Matt, whose disbelief had replaced his contempt, flinched at the words, but still held his ground. Jake could see the confusion etched across his brother's face, and with it came that flicker of connection he thought long extinguished. "I want you to know that I'm not asking for your approval," Jake continued, each word tinged with unrestrained conviction. "What I want is clarity between us. We've allowed silence and secrets to fester for too long." The air pulsed as Jake leaned into the moment, aware of the audience but increasingly focused on his brother. "The stony facade must crack, it had to. You've defined me through your lies for far too long. I refuse to live like that anymore." Matt looked caught between rage and guilt. For a split second, Jake saw the flickering acknowledgement that maybe his brother too had been ensnared by the complexity of familial expectations. "Don't you see, Matt?" Jake pressed, "This isn't about blame, it's about freedom. I need you to see me as I am now, not as some flawed reflection of what you want me to be. Let us begin anew." As the words left his lips, a shift rippled through the audience. A shared tension grew as others leaned forward, captivated by the confrontation. Jake felt the familiar pull of dread and anticipation mixing within. Their family dynamic hung in a delicate balance, but it was a chance he had to seize. Matt's eyes narrowed as if he were weighing a heavy decision, the silence conspiring against them both. "You think it can just change?" he finally replied, disbelief palpable in his tone. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but another voice rang out, one that shattered the moment. "What do you think will happen when you dig up the past?" It was their father, his booming inquiries landing like stones thrown into a still pond. Jake's heart raced. The depth of that question cut him deeply. The confrontation was far from over, and now, with the stakes escalated, Jake had no choice but to confront both his brother and father, facing an entire legacy that threatened to drag him down once again. As he tried to figure out how to respond, Matt's gaze hardened. Jake felt the storm brewing anew, and it became clear, the true reckoning was still ahead. Jake inhaled deeply as he attempted to regain composure. The atmosphere thickened with tension, heavy expectations pressing against him from all sides. He stood at the precipice of confrontation with Matt, the bitterness between them festering like an untreated wound. His father's figure loomed large, an intimidating shadow over the fragile conversation. Each word uttered by their patriarch felt like a reminder of past transgressions, entrenched judgments, and unyielding loyalties. Yet the challenge before him sparked a flicker of determination within Jake. Digging up the past might reveal hidden truths, Jake countered, his voice carrying a firmness he hadn't anticipated. But what's more damaging is denying our reality, the secrets we've all buried. He held his father's gaze, searching for a hint of recognition, perhaps even a spark of understanding. "I'm not afraid of the past, nor am I ashamed of it. I've grown from it." Matt's expression was like stone, yet Jake noticed a subtle shift, a tightening of his brother's jaw, a slight lowering of his defenses. The brief glimpse of vulnerability offered a spark of hope, an opening he could exploit. He realized this was his moment to redefine not only his relationship with Matt but also to dissolve the spectral grip their father's legacy held over them both. "Ask yourself, Dad," Jake continued, his tone steady, "what do you fear about facing the truth? Is it the dust we'll unearth, or is it the reality that we may not be who you imagined us to be?" With each word, he felt a surge of empowerment, a quiet confidence blooming from the core of his being. The silence that followed was palpable, a heavy curtain drawn across the room. Jake's pulse quickened, aware that this moment held the potential to pivot their lives dramatically. He had spent too long prioritizing the approval of others over his own voice, but no longer. An awakening coursed through him, a realization that only by facing his fears could he navigate toward clarity and liberation. Finally, the tension shattered. A bead of sweat formed at Matt's brow, betraying a flicker of uncertainty. "You think this is just some game?" Matt replied, his voice wavering. "You want an absolution you don't deserve." In that moment, Jake understood the profound grip of fear that defined their relationship. Matt's need to maintain dominance stemmed from years of internalized resentment and expectation. It stirred something deep within Jake, a profound empathy for his brother mixed with his own righteous indignation. "It's not a game," Jake refuted, his heart pounding with a mixture of compassion and righteous anger. "It's my life, and I refuse to be the scapegoat of your anger or expectations. I'm not seeking your forgiveness. I'm demanding respect and acknowledgement of my struggle." The visceral clarity of his own battles sent a cascade of emotion through him. Jake had wrestled with self-doubt for years, metaphorically silenced by the weight of family narratives that confined him. But here he stood, shaking off the chains that had bound him for so long. The paternal judgment, the scorn from his own blood, it all felt irrelevant, a mere echo against the burgeoning strength he was now embracing. Jake's gaze shifted, compellingly toward their father, who had turned slightly pale at the fervency of his son's words. "You've both tied me to a past I'm eager to rise above," he continued, recognizing the bravery flickering in his own spirit. "Instead of dragging me down, I'm here to invite you both to rise with me. Yes, the truth we uncover may sting. Yes, the revelations might be painful. But it's time to disentangle ourselves from the roots of resentment." Matt blinked, momentarily forgetting his hardened facade. In that instant, an opportunity blossomed, a chance to transform resentment into potential understanding. The air held its breath, and Jake seized it, fueled by a determination to ignite their connection despite years of separation. He prepared for the next move, aware that this confrontation could shatter long-held beliefs or spark change. But before he could continue, their father spoke again, his voice quieter, but piercingly defiant. "What if the truth breaks us?" As Jake absorbed the gravity of that question, hope and fear intermingled. He felt the urgency swell within him. The walls were closing in, and the confrontation was far from resolved. The storm was raging on, and Jake understood that his evolution from victim to this moment of potential reclamation was just the beginning. All of it, the truth, the honesty, could lead to liberation or it could lead to their undoing. In that charged silence, he recognized what lay ahead, the unraveling of deeply rooted ties that bound them together, in more ways than one. With this realization looming large, he took a step closer, poised for the next confrontation, ready to navigate through the remnants of the past and into an uncertain future. The direction of their family legacy now lay within the balance of this very moment. Jake felt the weight of his father's question echoing through the air, a treacherous specter lingering between them. "What if it breaks us?" he thought. It was a chilling thought, one that threatened to shatter the fragile resolve he was building. But deep down, Jake couldn't let that fear dictate his actions any longer. Steeling his resolve, he answered, "What if it liberates us? What if it allows us to redefine ourselves, to finally be honest with each other?" The intensity in his voice caught Matt off guard, prompting a faint flicker of concern in his eyes. Jake couldn't discern whether it was fear or hope reflected there, but either way, it ignited a spark in him, a certainty that they were standing on the precipice of transformation. In the depths of his mind, he replayed the moments that had led to this confrontation, the countless dinner-table disagreements, the silence that cloaked their family gatherings, and the years spent in the shadow of their father's expectations. Each memory felt sharper now, made vibrant by the steady drumbeat of his heartbeat. He had allowed too many years to elapse, too many conversations to be deferred to a time when they would all be ready. "No more waiting," he asserted, his voice rising with conviction. "I refuse to be an accessory in this family's history of unresolved anger. If we fall apart, then it's better to do it while we speak our truths than to remain locked in a cage of lies. The immediate shift in the room suspended time. Jake's vulnerability peeled back the layers of confrontation, displaying the raw emotions beneath. He was standing as he truly was, an exposed and unprotected man who had endured, who had learned to fight back. Suddenly, Jake realized he wasn't merely confronting his brother or their father. He was also confrontational with himself. He was compelled to dissect the fragments of his past, who he had been, who he was now, and the distance he still needed to travel toward healing. The depths of his childhood traumas lingered like shadows, but he could either let them consume him or harness their energy. Turning now to face Matt fully, he demanded, "What truths do you fear becoming your own? Not what Dad expected of you or what you think you must fulfill. What truth are you hiding from yourself?" Jake recognized the tremor in his own voice. It mirrored the trepidation he saw in Matt. Somewhere in that fear was vulnerability, and he hoped to excavate it. Matt's jaw clenched, his defenses rising once again, yet the flicker of indecision shone bright in his eyes. "You don't know what you're asking for," he growled, but Jake could sense the fracture in his resolve. "Maybe not," Jake replied, taking a deep breath to quell his growing anxiety. "But I want to learn. I want to understand how we could emerge from this stronger, not just divided. We've carried the weight of this conflict too long. You've carried it heavier than anyone." Their father remained silent, the stare between him and Jake serving as a benchmark for their emotional landscape. The realization dawned on Jake with piercing clarity. The men standing before him were not only brothers and a father, they were a family burdened by silence and brooding grievances. A vulnerability he had never experienced before began to flood the space between them, awakening the desire for connection. Would dissension yield to reconciliation? Could truths emerge without destruction? The silence was electric as Jake waited for Matt's response, aware that the next moment could irrevocably change everything. As tension coiled in the air, Jake understood he was not merely advocating for himself, he was daring them both to reclaim their identities from a past tainted by biting tongues and buried feelings. Then Matt spoke, lowering his voice to a whisper, "What if, instead of breaking us, it shows us who we really are?" That question, a daring honesty that echoed in the stillness, shifted Jake's perspective completely. It was an invitation, a flicker of possibility that ignited a fire of hope within him. As Matt took a tentative step forward, Jake could feel the walls around him vibrate with potential change. The revelation felt tangible, almost palpable, urging them to unlock the chains that bound their realities. They were about to dive into uncharted waters, where comfort zones would dissolve, and the prospect of true family emerged in the face of vulnerability. In that charged moment, Jake braced himself, recognizing that clarity awaited just beyond the uncertainties ahead. With the stakes higher than ever, they were on the verge of something monumental, and the aftermath of this confrontation could either set them free or entrap them further. With a nervous anticipation thrumming through his veins, he realized one truth remained unbroken: this confrontation was just the beginning as they teetered on the edge of profound discovery. The boundaries of their shared history were about to be rewritten, and Jake knew it would require every ounce of courage to see it through. As the weight of Matt's question hung in the air, Jake's heart raced, each anxious heartbeat spicy with adrenaline. The step Matt took forward felt monumental, like a ripple in the still waters where they had so long avoided true connection. What cracked next could either send them spiraling deeper into conflict, or gently coax them toward a fragile understanding. "This isn't just on you, Jake," Matt murmured, his voice barely audible yet tinged with urgency. "You can't push this on me as if I'm the only one holding us back. You have to own your part too." It was an unexpected counterpoint, one that momentarily stung. Jake's instinct was to defend himself, to insist that he was merely trying to lay the groundwork for their shared honesty. But beneath the sting lay a dawning realization: if he wanted to bridge the chasm between his brother and himself, he had to surrender the impulse to shift blame. "Okay, what do I need to own?" Jake said, leaning into the potential for growth instead of flinching away from it. Each word felt like an excavation, revealing layers he had buried for far too long. "It wouldn't be easy," but he needed to show readiness to confront his own missteps if they were to move forward. "The lies we tell ourselves," Matt replied, his anger dissipating like mist. "You've always played the role of the good son, the one who makes peace. But I see you, all of you. The doubt, the anger. You want it all at once, but you're afraid of being wrong. You don't want to disrupt the fragile peace we've maintained, even if it's a lie." The walls between them, built over years, were beginning to crack. Each admission felt like a stone dropped into a pond, generating ripples outward. Jake realized that each time he had tried to placate, he had inadvertently created a greater divide. There was a fear residing in him, a hesitation to disrupt the familiar, even if that familiarity was painful. "Does it matter if we feel wrong, though?" Jake pressed, his determination simmering with clarity. "Part of transformation is making mistakes, owning them, learning from them. We have been living according to someone else's script. It feels suffocating to be molded into characters in a drama we never agreed to act in. Why can't we discover who we are instead of who we think we should be?" Suddenly, the fact that he had once avoided confrontation, the very crux of his pain, felt like a tether snapped. Here, sharing vulnerabilities, admitting fears, and facing harsh realities had the potential to change everything. Matt's gaze softened, and the defiance began to fade, revealing the uncertainty that had underpinned their dynamics for so long. "Maybe you're right. I've been so busy trying to live up to Dad's expectations that I've abandoned what I want. I've neglected my voice in this family." Their father shifted slightly, finally breaking his silence. "This is new for all of us," he said, his voice gravelly as though it hadn't been used in a while. "Reliving these uncomfortable truths." The inclusion felt almost radical, and for the first time in years, Jake couldn't help but hope that maybe this could be a shared journey rather than an individualized descent into darkness. Jake turned to Matt, their eyes connecting in a silent understanding, a pact formed in revelation. "We deserve to live authentically, regardless of what it costs us in this moment. We carry the scars and the lessons, no more hiding in the shadows." And just as shadows seemed to retreat, the awareness hit Jake. This exchange was not just a family reckoning, it was also a critical moment of personal growth. He realized how easily he could hide behind shields of fear and anger, but it was time to step into the light of his own desires and aspirations. "I'm ready," Jake breathed, the certainty igniting a spark within him. "Ready to confront my truth and hope you'll join me. We need to rewrite our story together." "But what about Dad?" Matt questioned, a flicker of hesitation clouding his determination. Jake paused, feeling the gravity of the decisions they were approaching. What if revealing everything could set us all free? What if it in turn liberates him? As he spoke, anticipation hung thick in the air, and a new layer of tension formed. The walls remained worn from years of silence, but with conviction, he sensed a new foundation was beginning to rise. They stood at a precipice, not fully certain how deep this commitment to honesty would reach or what they might unearth about the past. With one last glance toward each other, the gravity of uncharted territory loomed before them. Jake couldn't help but wonder if this moment was only the first step toward a reckoning far greater than any of them anticipated. What truths lay buried yet waiting to emerge when they finally dared to unlock them? There was promise in that tension, a whisper of transformation stirring within. As the conversations lingered in the air, Jake's inner turmoil churned with renewed intensity. He felt the weight of his father's gaze, the unspoken expectations that had always been there, lurking in the shadows of their family dynamics. Was it possible that tackling this shared honesty could not only address their fraught relationship but also illuminate pathways to their own truths? A sharp inhale signaled the shift within him, the realization that he had spent too long accommodating others, living in half-truths, and sacrificing his authenticity. Each moment he had played the role of the peacemaker. Turmoil brewed beneath the surface, a storm of resentment waiting to erupt. Now, shaking off the constraints of his past, he steeled himself for what lay ahead. He knew he needed to push through the chaos to arrive at clarity. "Look," he began, addressing Matt with an earnestness that felt foreign yet liberating. "We have to acknowledge our roles in this, not just as brothers but as individuals burdened by expectations. If we want to move forward, we have to get uncomfortable. His voice gained momentum with every word, weighing the truth as he spoke. I want to confront what we've hidden. I can't be the good son anymore, and maybe that's not what you need either. Matt shifted uncomfortably, pulling back for a moment as if considering the totality of Jake's words. The air grew thick with tension, thin and fragile as they stood on this precipice of change. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he pondered the potential fallout. Could transparency really pave the way toward authenticity? His father leaned in, voice low and tentative. What do you mean by uncomfortable? What are you suggesting? We haven't examined our truths in years, Jake. The tremor in his father's tone made it clear that the prospect of revisiting old wounds was deeply unsettling. We have to start somewhere, Jake insisted. It can't be more of the same where we tiptoe around our issues, pretending they don't exist. We owe it to ourselves to lay everything on the table. For once, I don't want to hide. I want to explore everything. The challenge of pulling back the curtain on buried realities surged in Jake, a mixture of dread and exhilaration. As he felt an unexpected fire ignite within him, he also sensed the burden of vulnerability. The fear of rejection, abandonment, or worse, a volcanic eruption of past grievances threatened to fracture everything. But simply avoiding the truth was no longer an option. The idea of familial love devoid of honesty seemed hollow, and he felt repelled by the notion of perpetuating such a cycle. Okay, Matt said slowly, stepping into the territory Jake had just mapped out. Let us start with something small. Something we can own without it feeling like an avalanche. The tentative agreement sparked hope, igniting a shared eagerness to tangle with their histories. But even as they began to focus on the details, moments of betrayal, quiet resentment, the ground beneath Jake felt far from stable. Each revelation exposed fissures in their familial foundation that had long since cracked, and yet, they now stood poised to dig deeper. But there was a nagging thought that gnawed at him. What if the truths they uncovered were more disruptive than he anticipated? As much as they sought clarity, the fear emerged that some revelations could irrevocably alter their perceptions about family itself. Could his father, in all his wisdom, truly accept what lay beneath the surface? With his heart racing, Jake felt a shift within him. Such uncertainty was new, yet curiosity propelled him further into the depths. Perhaps it was time to take the first steps, even if it meant dancing along a tightrope of instability. The thrill of potential growth beckoned him forward, alongside the ghost of trepidation. Let us explore the first lie, then, Jake urged, the depth of conviction radiating from him. The one that led us to this moment. Above the tapestry of their family history loomed a question, waiting to be addressed, echoing through the silence. Would the act of unearthing familial pain forge a stronger bond, or would it unravel their already fragile connection? Meanwhile, shadows of unspoken truths still lingered, anxiously shying away from the light. Jake couldn't have known the imminent challenges they were about to face, nor the secrets that would drive a wedge deeper than he'd ever braced for. As they began to peel back layers of their past, a powerful revelation loomed. Could clarity grant relief, or would it, instead, carve new scars into their hearts? The atmosphere felt electric as they began to navigate uncharted waters. Jake braced himself for the unsettling journey ahead, aware that his voice could serve as both the vessel for truth and a catalyst for deeper emotional storms. He turned back to Matt, time stretching in the moments of silence. Okay, what was the first lie? Matt asked, his gaze locked onto Jake, a mixture of anticipation and fear glimmering in his eyes. The vulnerability in his brother's stance revealed more than any words could articulate, and Jake sensed the gravity of this inquiry, an opening into a dark chamber they had long neglected. I think Jake started, hesitation crawling in. The first lie has to be about Dad's expectations, not just yours, but our father's. A sharp intake of air punctuated the moment. Jake's pulse quickened as their father's face shifted, bracing for the impending discussion. Could he bear the weight of their father's reactions? This was the terrain they needed to traverse, but the stakes felt staggeringly high. Nothing else mattered until they addressed the unspoken pressure that intertwined their fates. Dad always seemed disappointed in both of us, Jake continued, his voice steadier than he felt. No matter what we did, it was never enough. It created this rift between us, motivating actions and choices that never reflected who we really are. We were expected to fulfill roles as roles. Matt nodded, leaning forward, his expression contemplative. You're right, and I think we both contributed to that facade. But why now? Why have we chosen to peel this back today? Jake reflected on the sincerity of that question. Maybe because I can't stand being trapped in the image of someone I'm not. It's suffocating. A deeper truth loomed behind his words, an echo of the boy he used to be, burdened by the weight of expectations both inside and outside his family. His father spoke, voice strained yet resilient. Expectations are a part of life, Jake. They're meant to guide you. But perhaps I've masked my true feelings under them. And we've conformed while chasing clarity, Jake replied, pressing on, feeling the tension twist into the opportunity for real dialogue. We've avoided confrontation to maintain peace. But what good is peace if it's predicated on dishonesty? As Jake fought internally with the quivering edges of this vulnerable path, he saw flickers of understanding pass through his father's eyes. This was not merely an exercise in revealing old wounds. It was the potential for healing through authenticity. You know, Matt interjected, a steely resolve taking form. The more we dig, the less sure I feel about where this will lead us. But avoiding it has gotten us nowhere. Jake acknowledged the truth in that statement. Each lie they uncovered served as both a potential key and a possible weapon. Could they handle the rawness? A part of him relished the thought of dismantling these old dynamics, while another trembled at the fear of what could potentially fracture their bond. What if these truths? Jake's voice softened, becoming almost a whisper, change us irreparably? Are we really prepared for what this might unearth? Silence filled the room, heavy with the echoes of past grievances waiting to be spoken into existence. They needed to brace for the inevitable turbulence that came with revelations. Each layer stripped away would reveal yet another painful truth. Determined to carve a new path forward, Jake asserted, we have to face this. It's the only way. If we want to redefine who we are as individuals and as a family, then we can't skip over the uncomfortable stuff. He felt the tapering of the air between them, a bridge under construction. Would they cross it together, or would this exposure shatter the ground beneath them? The uncertainty loomed, pulsing with tension that bound them in a tentative unity. Then let us dive deeper, Matt replied, a fragile yet resolute agreement taking shape. Let us take stock of every lie that has perpetuated our pain, reflect on how they've shaped us, splintering our connection. This path will be tumultuous, but maybe we can forge something new on the other side. Jake steeled his resolve. And if we hold each other accountable, we might just emerge stronger. The moment of truth is here, we just need to embrace it. In that shared resolve, an uncharted territory lay ahead, promising both unexpected catharsis and tumultuous revelations. Would they rise from these depths transformed, or would the weight of authenticity plunge them into deeper chaos than they had ever known? As they shifted from the brink of uncertainty into the thick blanket of their shared fears, Jake's heart raced, a primal rhythm echoing the tension in the room. There was relief in the vulnerability they had agreed to embrace, yet the boundaries of their relationship felt more fragile than ever. Each revelation held the potential for reconciliation or rupture. Jake clung to the idea of connection, but what lay ahead seemed tangled in shadows of doubt. Let us not just talk about Dad, Jake said, clutching the edge of the sofa, the fabric rough against his palms. What about our expectations of each other? What's the next lie? There was a heat swirling within him, mixing resolve and apprehension. Admitting inadequacies had never been his strong suit, but this moment demanded honesty and authenticity that would strip away the false images they had constructed. Matt's face shifted, the initial vitality replaced with the somber weight of recollections. I think the expectation of being perfect, Matt confessed, breaking eye contact for a brief moment. We wanted to prove ourselves to Dad, to each other. We both fell short, didn't we? Jake felt a rush of emotions, anger, sadness, but also understanding. They had spent years wearing masks of perfection, all while struggling beneath the expectations tied to familial bonds. It was never about perfection, Jake reassured, but his voice trembled slightly. It was about being human, flawed, and real. But can you still be successful without that image? Matt challenged, eyes filled with questions of worth, identity, and potential. What if this shatters everything? Jake pondered the implications, each word a weighted pebble falling into an abyss. There was something profoundly liberating about peeling back those layers of deceit, yet fear lay coiled within him. Would embracing their inadequacies draw them closer, or plunge them deeper into resentment? The very idea of opening up felt like a paradox, a necessity to grow but also a risk of being left exposed. Maybe success isn't about wearing that mask anymore, Jake continued, his voice gathering strength with each phrase. What if it's about being vulnerable with true desires and failures? What if we challenged each other to define our own success? As the dialogue unfolded, Jake caught flickers of something changing in Matt's demeanor. The fear began to dissipate, replaced by curiosity. They were brave enough to explore the rawness of their past, but was the path to understanding and healing truly worth the risk? Every lie outside of us has pushed us further apart, hasn't it? Matt whispered, almost to himself. This can't just stop here. We owe it to ourselves to dig through it all. The implications of their conversation felt more profound with each acknowledgement. Jake knew there were uncharted emotions lurking, needing to surface amid the struggle. Could they confront their faults openly and emerge from the chaos unscathed? Each truth they disclosed felt like an unraveling thread, one that could either lead to a beautiful tapestry or a frayed fabric. I want to hold myself accountable too, Jake said fiercely. If we're working on understanding our expectations, I can't just point fingers. We need to lift each other up when we falter, not drive each other deeper into insecurity. In that moment, Jake felt a burgeoning sense of purpose, one that began to crush the lingering weight of their past. Each confession would be a stepping stone away to craft a new narrative. The dynamic among them would be tested, but perhaps honesty could illuminate a path forward. The air felt charged, and Jake bit his lip, wondering what burdens they would disentangle next. If lies formed chains, what power could the truth bestow, and what newly forged identities awaited? He glanced at Matt, who seemed ready yet apprehensive. Are we really ready to face it all? Jake asked, the question heavy, yet filled with the urgency of discovery. What if, confronting these expectations, we find something we never wanted to see? Matt met his gaze, unyielding. We can't know unless we try. It's time for the aftermath of these lies to unravel. As they stood at the precipice, ready to confront the chaotic remnants of their history, surrounding them lay an expansive void radiating with uncertainty and anticipation. What lay ahead was uncharted, but Jake felt more empowered than before, albeit with a sense of imminent upheaval. The upcoming moments promised painful revelations. Would they find liberation through confession, or would the truth become an even heavier burden? And as they took that first step into the unknown, Jake knew one thing with certainty: their story was far from over. Months passed since the fateful reunion, and the air seemed different around Jake. Instead of suffocating under the weight of expectations, he found a new rhythm, one that pulsated with authenticity and clarity. His research, once merely an outlet for validation, had blossomed into a pioneering study accepted for publication in one of the most prestigious medical journals. As he skimmed through the acceptance email, a triumphant smile broke across his face. This was no longer just accomplishment. It was recognition of his hard work and determination. Jake had dug deep, both in the lab and within himself. The confrontation with Matt had opened a floodgate of uncomfortable truths but also unforeseen growth. They had begun dismantling the structure of their relationship built on fears and unaddressed grievances. Each conversation brought revelations, peeling back layers of resentment that had festered for years. In unveiling their past, both brothers encountered their vulnerabilities, forged deeper connections, and ultimately, fostered mutual understanding. It was a continual challenge. They learned to hold each other accountable while nurturing their emotional scars. The discussions around those dinner tables, which once exploded with tension, transformed into dialogues laced with empathy, often punctuated by laughter and growth. Their father's watchful eye became less a judgment and more a presence that encouraged their liberation, allowing them to navigate these turbulent waters together. Jake's heart swelled with pride, embodying a sense of accomplishment that extended beyond academic success. It was personal fulfillment birthed from years of introspection and confrontation of his own weaknesses. "I've invested in myself," Jake asserted to Matt during their latest deep dive, "and I realize it's not just about being successful or approved of. It's about being true to myself." Matt's nod of understanding resonated deeply with Jake. Together, they began the daunting work of reconstructing their familial bond, allowing for the exploration of more and more truths at the core of their experiences. No longer just siblings trying to survive under the looming shadow of perfect expectations, they had since morphed into allies determined to navigate their journey with honesty. Jake's professional recognition mirrored his personal milestones. The way people viewed him shifted, no longer just the cast-off son, he was achieving his goals with a newfound strength that imbued him with confidence. His relationships, forged anew from vulnerability, brought comfort and affirmation he had never truly anticipated growing up. Attending family gatherings now felt different. The fear of condemnation morphed into an opportunistic exploration of healing. They had even shared moments of insistence on their vulnerability. Jake recalled one evening when the family shared stories of past failures that were initially brushed aside in their pursuit of perfection. A once intolerable exercise transformed into an enlightening experience, creating a new familial bond based on shared understanding and acceptance of their imperfections. As the evening of his first significant presentation approached, Jake stood before the mirror, reflecting not only on his physical appearance but on the journey that brought him here. He understood that this moment carried weight not only in his research community but in his redefined self-perception, the reclamation of his narrative. When he stepped into the conference hall, the air thick with optimistic anticipation, Jake could feel every eye upon him, not with skepticism but with genuine curiosity. Turning his attention to the crowd, he launched into a compelling presentation about his revolutionary findings. The confidence he wielded stemmed not just from his academic prowess, but the acceptance of his existence beyond the confines of his family's past narratives. Applause erupted at the end, but unlike the recognition he had craved in previous years, this was earned through validation of his true self, untethered by bygone perceptions. With each clap, Jake felt the echoes of laughter with Matt by his side and their father's cautious pride warming his heart. As he basked in the glory of accomplishment on that stage, Jake recognized just how far he had journeyed. The vision of a broken boy exiled from his family had transformed into that of a respected researcher and, more importantly, a reconciled man. Through each tumultuous conversation, and every truth unveiled, he had learned how to combat fear, foster relationships, and respect himself in ways he never thought possible. Jake stood there, reflecting on the path that lay ahead. He had proven that healing, though challenging, could yield profound growth and reconnection. Today, as roads unfurled in front of him, the journey seemed brighter, paved with the strength he had created through perseverance and conflict. He was finally moving toward a future that mirrored his aspirations with unapologetic authenticity. This was not just a concluding chapter, but the prologue to a life lived with intention, a story transformed from the darkness of betrayal into the richness of human experience and connection. Now is the time to act. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and enhance our community. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your insights matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share.